The screw was wrong. Or the hole was wrong. Or the entire goddamn particle board bookshelf was a monument to somebody's terrible Monday morning. I grunted, my back screaming a protest from its new position on the floor of apartment 404. The smell of fresh paint was a chemical burn in the back of my throat, a constant reminder of the blank slate I was trying to force upon my life. It wasn't working. You can't paint over a cracked foundation. Shit, I muttered, the words swallowed by the high ceilings of the half-empty room. The instruction manual, a single sheet of paper covered in inscrutable diagrams, lay beside me like a taunt. A cartoon man with an unnerving smile effortlessly slotted piece A into piece B. My piece A had a splintered edge. My sweat dripped onto the cheap laminate flooring. I reached for the Phillips head screwdriver. I had rested on the top step of the small stepladder beside me. My fingers closed on empty air. I blinked, then patted the metal step again. Nothing. I craned my neck. It wasn't on the floor to the left, not to the right. Not nestled in the folds of the plastic wrapping from the bookshelf parts. God damn it, I hissed, pushing myself up to my knees. The room was a mess of cardboard and packing tape, but the area immediately around me was clear. Where the hell did it go? I scanned the perimeter, a lazy circle of irritation. It couldn't have just walked off. I pictured it rolling, a slow, metallic tumble into a shadow. It was probably behind one of the larger boxes I'd stacked against the far wall. I didn't have the energy to move them. I let out a long breath and slumped back down. The hell with it. I pulled a small, red-handled fruit knife from my pocket. The blade was barely 2 inches long. It would have to do. I jammed the tip of the knife into the cross-shaped head of the screw. It was a poor fit. The metal of the screw head was harder than the cheap steel of the knife. With every turn, my wrist aching, the knife tip threatened to slip and slice open my thumb. The wood groaned. The screw moved a millimeter. Another turn. It slipped. The sharp edge bit into the particle board, peeling off a sliver of the fake wood veneer. Piece of shit, I said, to the screw, to the knife, to the whole empty apartment. That's when I heard it. Tap. Tap. The sound came from the wall to my left, the one I shared with apartment 405. It wasn't the creak of settling pipes or the distant thud of a door closing. It was precise. Measured. Like a knuckle rapping twice against drywall. Clear and close. I stopped moving. The knife hung loosely in my hand. The hum of the refrigerator in the small kitchen suddenly seemed very loud. I held my breath, listening. Silence returned. Thick and watchful. I told myself it was nothing. A neighbor hanging a picture. That's all. People live in buildings. They make noise. It's normal. But a cold wire of unease had been tripped inside my chest. It felt deliberate. The timing of it. Right when my frustration was at its peak. I slowly, quietly, placed the fruit knife on the floor. I got onto my hands and knees, the laminate cool against my palms, and crawled the few feet to the wall. I pressed my ear against the cool, painted surface. I heard a faint, whispery rush. Water in the pipes, maybe. Or the sound of my own blood pulsing in my ear. Nothing else. I stayed there for a full minute, a statue of foolishness, listening to a dead wall. Nothing. I pulled back, sighing at my own jumpiness. A new city, a new place. Everything felt strange. I turned my body to go back to the half-assembled shelf, my eyes sweeping across the floor in front of me. And I saw it. It was lying in the exact center of the open floor space between my work area and the wall. The Phillips head screwdriver. Its yellow and black plastic handle was clean. Its metal tip gleamed under the single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. It was placed perfectly parallel to the seams of the floorboards. I stared at it. That patch of floor had been empty a minute ago. I knew it was. I had crawled across it. I had looked right at it when I was searching. My gaze had passed over that very spot at least 3 times. It wasn't there. And now it was. My throat felt tight. I didn't get up. I just knelt there, watching the screwdriver as if it might move again. My mind raced, trying to build a bridge of logic to this moment. Did it fall from the ladder and roll there? No. The ladder was 3 feet away and the floor was perfectly level. Did I kick it without realizing? No. I would have felt it, heard it. Did I move it myself and forget? In the span of 2 minutes? A sound from the front door pulled my head up with a jerk. A thin, dry whisper. The sound of paper sliding on wood. I saw a small white rectangle appear in the gap under my door, pushed through from the hallway. It stopped. My heart hammered against my ribs, a fast, hard drumbeat. I was frozen, a spectator in my own apartment. The silence rushed back in, heavier this time. Slowly, as if moving through deep water, I pushed myself to my feet. My legs felt unsteady. I took one step, then another, my eyes fixed on the small folded paper lying on the floor. It looked harmless, an ad for a pizza place, a notice from the building manager. I bent down, my fingers trembling slightly as I picked it up. It was a piece of paper torn from a spiral-bound notebook. Unfolding it, I saw handwriting in smooth, blue ink. The letters were rounded, distinctly feminine. Thought you might need this. Welcome to the building. Apt 405. The air left my lungs. My blood went cold. Thought you might need this. The screwdriver. She knew I needed the screwdriver. My gaze shot from the note to the wall I shared with her, then back to the note. She had heard me, struggling, cursing. Had she seen me? How could she have seen me? Bako, I lurched toward the door, my mind a storm of questions. I pressed my eye to the peephole. The hallway was empty. A pale fluorescent light cast a sickly yellow glow on the beige walls. The door to 405 across the hall was closed. There was no one there. Not a shadow, not a sound. My hand went to the doorknob. I had to see. I had to know who was playing this game. I turned the knob. It didn't move. I frowned, turned it again. Harder. It was solid, as if the mechanism inside had fused together. It wasn't locked. There was no give at all, no click from the deadbolt I hadn't even thrown. It felt held. My pulse throbbed in my neck. What the? I wrapped both hands around the cold brass. My feet braced against the floor and pulled with all my strength. The knob didn't budge. The wood of the doorframe creaked under the pressure. It was like trying to open a bank vault. Something on the other side was holding it shut. A wedge. A hand. A body. Panic, pure and white-hot, flooded me. I was trapped. I yanked again, a strangled noise tearing from my throat. Nothing. For 5 solid seconds of frantic, desperate pulling, the door was an immovable object. I could hear my own ragged breathing, loud and harsh in the quiet room. Then, just as suddenly, it was free. The knob turned with a smooth, effortless click. My own momentum sent me stumbling back a step. The release was more shocking than the resistance. My hand flew off the knob as if it were red hot. I didn't open the door. I backed away from it, one slow step after another. My eyes were locked on the thin brass line of the peephole. My sanctuary had become a cage, and the key was in someone else's hand. The idea of opening the door now, of seeing who or what was waiting in that empty-looking hall, was unthinkable. The game had changed. This wasn't a welcome. It was a demonstration of control. My gaze darted around the room, looking for a place to hide. It was a primal, stupid instinct, but I couldn't fight it. The stack of flattened cardboard boxes against the far wall. I scrambled behind them, crouching low, my back pressed against the wall. The cardboard smelled of dust and distance. I held my breath until my lungs burned. I strained my ears, trying to hear past the roaring in my own head. That's when I heard the footsteps. They were impossibly light. A soft, shuffling sound on the industrial carpet of the hallway. So faint I thought I might be imagining it. A delicate shuff, shuff, shuff. They passed directly in front of my door and continued down the hall, fading away until there was nothing. Just silence. A silence that was now filled with a new and terrible awareness. She was out there. She had held my door shut. She had listened to my panic. And then, she had just walked away, leaving me here, waiting. I don't know how long I stayed there, crouched behind the boxes in the dark. 10 minutes. An hour. Time seemed to have stretched and thinned into a useless measure. Eventually, the burning in my calves forced me to move. I rose slowly, my joints stiff, and peered over the top of the cardboard. The room was just as I had left it, a monument to my failed attempt at a new life. I crept toward the front door, my bare feet making no sound on the floor. I looked down at the spot where the note had been. It was gone. There was nothing there. Just the smooth, unbroken surface of the laminate. My heart gave a painful lurch. I scanned the floor around the entryway. It wasn't there. It had vanished as completely as the screwdriver had appeared. My mind reeled. Had I imagined the note? The spidery blue ink? The welcome from 405? My eyes moved to the middle of the room, to the spot where the screwdriver had lain. That was gone too. But something else was there. In its place, on the dark faux wood grain, was a small coin-sized circular mark. It was faint, a slight darkening of the surface. I knelt down, my face close to the floor. It was a smudge of moisture, still damp to the touch. It had no smell. It was just a small, cloudy disk of water, already beginning to evaporate into the dry air of the room, leaving nothing behind at all. My back was flat against the wall, my knees drawn up to my chest. The cardboard boxes I had hidden behind earlier still smelled of the factory that made them. I stayed that way for a long time, watching the spot where the wet mark had been, watching it shrink and then disappear completely. My phone felt heavy and hot in my hand. I needed to hear a voice that wasn't in my head. I scrolled to Sarah's name. My thumb hovered over the call button. My hand was shaking. I pressed it. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Her voice was too loud, too cheerful. "Hey you made it. How's the new place? Is it horrible? Tell me it's horrible." I tried to make my own voice work. It came out as a croak. I cleared my throat. The sound was rough. "Hey Sarah, yeah, I'm here. You sound like you've been gargling rocks. Moving day sucks, I know. But you're in. A new chapter, right? That's what we talked about." "Yeah, a new chapter," I repeated. The words felt like someone else's. I looked around the room. The half-built bookshelf. The scattered packing materials. The bare bulb overhead. "It's a place. Paint's fresh." I was lying. The smell of paint felt like a warning now. A fresh coat over something old and stained. "Just a place. Come on, give me details. Big windows? Cute neighbors? Don't tell me you've already scared everyone off with your grumpy face." My eyes shot to the wall I shared with 405. No neighbors seemed quiet. The lie felt slick on my tongue. "Look, I just called to check in. Say I'm here. It's been a long day." Okay, I get it. Unpack. Try to find your toothbrush. Call me tomorrow, for real this time? Yeah. Tomorrow. My knuckles were white where I gripped the phone. My whole body felt tight, a coiled spring of tension. "Get some rest, little brother. Love you." "Yeah," I said again, my gaze fixed on the wall. I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me, so heavy it was a physical weight. Christ, I'd kill for a coffee right now. It was a stupid throwaway comment, a sigh disguised as words. "Make some then, lazybones. Talk tomorrow." She hung up. The disconnection tone buzzed in my ear, loud and final. I lowered the phone. Silence rolled back into the room, heavier than before. I sat there, on the floor, for another minute, maybe 5. The muscles in my back began to ache. I needed to stand up. I needed to do something normal. Finish the bookshelf. Unpack a box. Anything. I pushed myself to my feet, my joints complaining. I walked into the small kitchen area, a simple L shape of countertop and cheap, wood-effect cabinets. I was going to get a glass of water. Just a glass of water from the tap. My eyes scanned the counter as I approached the sink. And I stopped. My feet were bolted to the floor. My breath caught in my throat. On the counter, near the edge, sat a white ceramic mug. A thin, steady curl of steam rose from its dark surface. It was placed on a small, delicate saucer, the kind with little blue flowers painted around the rim. I did not own a mug like that. I did not own a saucer like that. All my kitchen supplies were still in a box labeled kitchen stuff, in thick black marker sealed with tape, and sitting by the front door. I had no coffee maker. I had no coffee. I took one slow step forward. Then another. The air was rich with the scent of dark roast coffee. A good, strong smell. It made my stomach clench. It was real. I could smell it. I could see the steam. It was hot. My hand reached out, my fingers trembling. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. This was not possible. There was no way for this to be here. My gaze fell on something next to the saucer. A piece of paper, folded in half. The same paper as before, torn from a spiral notebook. My heart began to pound against my ribs, a fast, hard rhythm that I could feel in my throat. I knew what it was. I didn't want to look at it, but I couldn't look away. I picked it up. The paper was smooth and cool. I unfolded it. The same rounded, blue ink script. Have a good day. Your neighbor. No welcome. No room number. Just a statement. Your neighbor. The words implied a level of knowledge that made my skin crawl. This person, this thing, wasn't just in the building. It was in my head. It had heard my wish, spoken into the private space of a phone call, and made it a reality. A goddamn cup of coffee, placed on my counter. The shock turned into a hot surge of anger. I was being toyed with. A rat in a maze. The time for being scared was over. It was time for a confrontation. I threw the note onto the counter. I turned and strode out of the kitchen, my footsteps loud on the laminate. I didn't hesitate at my front door. I yanked it open. The hallway was empty. The yellowish lights hummed. I crossed the short distance to apartment 405 in 3 long strides. The door was identical to mine. A brass 405 was screwed into the wood. I balled my hand into a fist and struck the door. Hard. Bam! 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 The sound echoed in the narrow hall. I waited. Nothing. Not a sound from within. My pulse throbbed in my ears. I hit it again. Harder this time, using the heel of my hand. The impact sent a jolt up my arm. Hello? I called out, my voice louder than I intended. I know you're in there. Open the door. Silence answered me. A dead, deep silence. I put my ear to the door. I heard nothing. No shuffling. No breathing. Just the low hum of the building's electricity. I'm not playing games, I said, my voice shaking with a rage that was half fear. I grabbed the doorknob. It was cold. I turned it. The lock mechanism made a dry, unoiled sound. A click. The door swung inward. It wasn't locked. It had never been locked. It opened with a low, drawn-out creak. The sound of hinges that had not moved in a very long time. The air that rolled out of the apartment was cold and smelled of damp plaster and old, settled dust. It was a dead smell. The light from the hallway cut a yellow wedge into the darkness inside. I pushed the door open further. I looked inside. The apartment was a mirror of mine, an empty shell. But it was not a new empty. It was an old empty. There was no fresh paint on the walls. There were water stains on the ceiling, dark continents on a cracked landscape. The floor was covered in a thick, uniform layer of pale gray dust. It was completely undisturbed. It was like the surface of the moon. I took a step inside. My shoe left a clear, dark print in the gray film on the floor. It was the only one. There were no other marks. No footprints leading from the door. No scuffs. No swirling patterns from a draft. Just a pristine blanket of filth, broken now only by my own trespass. The windows were grimy, letting in a weak, cloudy light. I could see the outlines of a kitchen counter, a space where a refrigerator should have been. Everything was coated in that same gray powder. Nothing had been moved in here for months, maybe years. This apartment was vacant. It was abandoned. A chill, entirely separate from the cold air of the room, went through me. My anger evaporated, replaced by a deep, hollow dread. There was no neighbor. There had never been a neighbor. I backed out of the doorway, one step, then another. I didn't want my back to the dark opening. My hand found the edge of the door, and I pulled it shut. It closed with a soft thud, the latch clicking into place. I stared at the brass numbers. 405. I turned and almost ran back to my own apartment. I didn't bother to close the door behind me. I had to see. I had to prove to myself that the other thing, the impossible thing, was real. I stormed into the kitchen, my eyes locked on the spot on the counter where the mug had been. It was bare. The counter was clean. The white ceramic mug was gone. The saucer with the little blue flowers was gone. The handwritten note was gone. I lunged forward, my palms slapping down flat on the laminate surface. It was cool and smooth. There was no smear of liquid, no residual heat, no crumb from a biscuit I hadn't seen. It was clean. It was dry, as if nothing had ever been there at all. My hands gripped the edges of the porcelain sink. The ceramic was cold. I stared at my face in the medicine cabinet mirror. The man looking back was a stranger. His eyes were too wide. Dark rings smudged beneath them like bruises. His skin was pale, clammy. I could see a fine tremor in his jaw. "You're fine." The thought was a command, not a comfort. "You're just tired. It was a long drive. It's a new place. That's all." I repeated the words in my head. A mantra against the chaos. My own reflection stared back, unblinking. For less than a second, a flicker in the space between heartbeats, the corners of its mouth pulled upwards. A slow, knowing smile. A sharp, predatory curving of the lips that my own face did not make. I jerked back, a strangled noise caught in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, my knuckles white on the sink. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I counted to 3. Slow. I opened them again. It was just my face. Tired. Scared. No smile. Nothing. My lungs expelled a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was the stress. The move. The past. It had to be. An overtired mind plays tricks. That's all. I leaned forward, turning on the cold tap. The gush of water was loud in the small bathroom. I cupped my hands, splashed the cold water on my face. It was a shock. A jolt to the system. The water dripped from my chin, tapping a rhythm under the porcelain basin. I did it again, scrubbing at my eyes with the heels of my hands. I straightened up slowly, water running down my neck and under the collar of my shirt. I looked at the mirror. Through the water droplets clinging to my eyelashes, I saw it. The steam from my own breath had fogged the glass. And in the center of the fog, letters had been traced by a finger. They were clear for only a moment, like a secret message meant only for me before it vanished. "Don't trust him." The words hung there for a second, 2 at most, before the condensation began to shrink away from them. They blurred, thinned, and then they were gone, leaving only a clear patch on the otherwise fogged glass. My breath hitched. He had been here. In the bathroom with me, a half-second ago. Standing right behind me. I spun around. My back hit the tiled wall with a dull thud. The shower curtain was pulled back. The small room was empty. The door was closed. I had closed it myself. There was nowhere to hide. My gaze darted around the room, searching the corners, the space under the sink. Nothing. Not a sound, but the steady drip, drip, drip of the faucet I hadn't turned off all the way. The silence that followed was dense, heavy with implication. Someone had been close enough to touch me, close enough to write a warning on the mirror I was looking into. That was it. I was done being the mouse. I was done questioning my own senses. The coffee, the note, the writing on the mirror. This wasn't in my head. It was real. And if it was real, someone had to have answers. I wrenched the bathroom door open and stalked out into the main room. The unpacked boxes seemed to mock me with their silent presence. I ignored them. I grabbed my keys from the counter where the mug had been, the cool metal a solid, reassuring weight in my sweaty palm. I left my apartment, not bothering to lock it, and went to the elevator. The ride down was slow. The car hummed and creaked. I found the manager's office in the basement, next to the laundry room. A cheap wooden door with a stenciled sign, "Manager." The air down here was different, cooler. It smelled of stale coffee and industrial disinfectant. I knocked once, hard. A muffled, "Yeah?" came from inside. I pushed the door open. The office was small, cluttered. Piles of paperwork covered every surface of a metal desk. On the wall, a bank of small, dark monitors showed grainy black and white feeds from cameras in the hallways and lobby. A man sat in a worn-out office chair, his back to me, staring at the screens. He was a large man, with a gut that strained the buttons of his plaid shirt. He didn't turn around. "Help you with something?" he asked, his voice flat. "I live in 404, I said. "I just moved in today." "Right. The new guy." He swiveled his chair around. His face was puffy, his eyes tired. He looked like he hadn't slept well in years. "Name's Henderson. Something wrong with the apartment? Leaks? Pests?" "No, nothing like that. The apartment's fine. I have a question about my neighbor." Henderson frowned. A deep line appeared between his eyebrows. "Your neighbor?" "Yeah. Apartment 405. He stared at me. It wasn't a normal look. It was a slow, analytical stare, like he was trying to figure out if I was joking. "What about apartment 405? I wanted to know who lives there. A woman?" Henderson leaned back in his chair. The springs groaned in protest. He continued to stare at me, his expression unreadable. "Kid, what are you talking about? Nobody lives in 405. The air in the room felt suddenly colder. "What do you mean, nobody lives there? I've met her." The lie came out before I could stop it. It sounded weak, even to me. "No, you haven't," he said, his voice dropping. It was firm, absolute. He wasn't arguing, he was stating a fact. "That apartment has been empty for over a year. No one's been inside it. We can't rent it." My own words from the phone call with Sarah echoed in my head. Neighbors seemed quiet. "That's not possible," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I saw her. I heard her. There was a—" My mind raced. A coffee cup. A note. How could I explain any of it without sounding insane? "Listen to me," Henderson said, leaning forward and placing his thick hands on his desk. He looked me straight in the eye. "Apartment 405 is vacant. Has been ever since the incident. Nobody goes in there." The word hung in the air between us. Incident? What incident? Henderson opened his mouth to speak, but was cut off by a sudden shrill ringing. It was the phone on his desk, an old landline model. Its plastic shell was yellowed with age. The sound was jarringly loud in the small office. He held my gaze for another second before snatching the receiver up. "Yeah, Henderson," he grunted into the phone. He listened for a moment, his eyes still on me. His expression changed. It softened, a flicker of something that looked like pity. "Ah, Lynn. Yeah, he's right here. He's asking about you, actually." My blood ran cold. Lynn. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Henderson held the phone out to me. The black plastic gleamed under the single fluorescent light bulb overhead. "It's your neighbor," he said. My hand felt like it weighed 100 pounds. My arm moved on its own, my fingers closing around the receiver he was holding out. It was warm from his hand. I brought it to my ear. My whole body was rigid. I could hear the hum of the open line. For a second, there was only silence. Then, a sound. A soft, wet intake of breath. It was shallow, struggling. It sounded like it was coming from very far away, down a long, dark tunnel. Then a voice, a whisper so faint I could barely make it out. It was raspy and broken. "Why were you looking for me?" I dropped the phone. It clattered against the desk, then fell to the concrete floor, the coiled cord stretching and then yanking it back. It dangled just above the ground, swinging slightly. The whispered voice was gone. I looked up at Henderson. His mouth was slightly open, his eyes were wide, but he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring over my shoulder, at the empty doorway behind me. His face drained of all color. His eyes were fixed on that empty space, wide, with a pure, undiluted horror. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. His voice was a choked, strangled thing. The girl standing behind you. Oh God, all the blood." A cold dread, sharp and clean as a shard of glass, pierced through me. I didn't want to turn. I was pinned in place by the terror in his eyes. But I had to. Slowly, every muscle screaming in protest, I turned my head and looked back at the open doorway. There was nothing there, just the dusty basement hallway. The faint hum of the fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant. I whipped my head back to Henderson. He was pushing his chair back, his hands scrabbling at his desk, trying to get away from what he was seeing. His eyes were still locked on the space behind me. She's right there," he stammered, pointing a trembling finger. His eyes rolled back in his head. A low groan escaped his lips, and he slumped forward. His head hit the scattered paperwork on his desk with a heavy, wet-sounding thud. Then he slid from his chair and collapsed onto the floor in a heap. Unconscious. The office was silent again, except for one sound. From the phone receiver, still dangling by its cord, I could hear the monotonous, steady beeping of a disconnected line. It was the only real thing in the room. The elevator ride up was a slow ascent from one hell to another. The air in the car was thick, tasting of metal and Henderson's stale coffee breath. My own breath came in short, sharp bursts. I watched the numbers light up, each one a step further away from the man lying on the floor of that basement office. I did not pull out my phone. I did not call for help. The image of his face, slack-jawed and pale, his eyes fixed on the empty space behind me, was burned onto the back of my eyelids. The girl, all the blood. My feet carried me down the fourth-floor hallway. The carpet absorbed the sound of my steps. 402. 403. My door, 404, was ajar. Just as I had left it. I pushed it open, stepped inside, and shut it fast. The deadbolt made a solid, final sound. I slid the chain lock across its track. The metal screeched. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped thing. I needed an anchor. Something real. Something from before. Before this apartment. Before Henderson. Before the whisper on the phone. My laptop was on the kitchen counter, buried under a pile of discarded packing paper. I dug it out. The metal case was cool and smooth in my trembling hands. I carried it to the living room, clearing a space on the floor amidst a sea of cardboard boxes. I sat with my back against the wall, the laptop a shield on my knees. I flipped it open. The screen glowed to life, a bright white rectangle in the dim room. My fingers fumbled on the trackpad. I clicked on the photo folder. A grid of thumbnails appeared. Sarah on our first date, her smile so wide it crinkled the corners of her eyes. My brother, grinning, holding up a ridiculously small fish on a camping trip. Mom and Dad on their porch, waving. These were my people. This was my life. The one I had. The one I'd left behind. I clicked through them, one by one. The images were sharp, clean. They were proof. Proof of a world where things made sense. Where reflections didn't smile on their own, and empty apartments stayed empty. I just had to hold on. Just get through the night. In the morning I would pack. I would leave this place. I would drive until the tires wore out. I would never look back. The thought was a lifeline. I clung to it. My finger hovered over the trackpad. I had been mindlessly scrolling down through the file list, past the named folders, into the loose collection of miscellaneous images and downloads at the bottom. My eyes caught on a file I didn't recognize. It was different from the others. It wasn't a .jpeg or a .png, it was a video file. The icon was a generic film strip. The name was one word. Memories.mp4. I stared at it. It was a new file. The date created stamp was from today, an hour ago, while I was in the basement. That was not possible. I had not downloaded anything. I had not created any new files. It was just there, sitting on my desktop, an uninvited guest. My first impulse was to drag it to the trash, to delete it, to pretend I had never seen it. But I couldn't. The cursor shook under my finger. My breath was shallow. The air in the room felt heavy, dense. I had to know. I moved the cursor over the icon. It hovered there for a long moment. Then I clicked. The screen went black. For a second, I saw my own reflection. A pale, drawn face staring back from the dark glass. Then, the video started. There was no sound at first, just an image. It was a view from inside a car. Through the windshield. It was night. Rain lashed against the glass, distorting the world outside into a smear of streetlights and darkness. Then, the sound kicked in. A low hum. The squeak and slap of windshield wipers moving back and forth, clearing the water in rhythmic hypnotic arcs. A radio played softly. A talk show host's voice garbled by static. My blood turned to ice. I knew this car. I knew this squeak. It was my old sedan. The one I sold for scrap metal. I knew this night. The rain. The dark stretch of highway. The memory wasn't a photo I could close. It was a physical place my mind was being dragged back into. The wheel was slick under my hands. The smell of wet asphalt filled my nose. The argument with Sarah replayed in my head. Her words sharp. My answers clipped and angry. Driving too fast. Way too fast. My heart was a fist, clenched tight in my chest. I tried to move my hand, to close the laptop, but my arm wouldn't obey. I was paralyzed, forced to watch. The headlights cut a tunnel through the pouring rain. Trees whipped past on the right, a dark, solid wall. On the left, nothing but the blackness of the shoulder and the ditch beyond. The car hit a puddle. Water sprayed up, and for a second the windshield was completely blind. My own hands in the present clenched into fists, my knuckles white. Then a new sound emerged from the laptop's cheap speakers. It was underneath the rain, underneath the radio. A low whisper. It was not the talk show host. It was a woman's voice. It was faint, broken, mixed with a wet, static crackle. Cold. It wasn't a word I heard with my ears. I felt it in the base of my skull. It was the same voice from the phone in Henderson's office. "So cold, Alex." "My name." She said my name. A name I hadn't heard anyone speak in months. A name I was running from. My legal name. The name on the police report. I lurched forward, my hand finally breaking free. I slammed my finger on the escape key. Nothing. I jabbed at the power button. The screen stayed on. The wipers kept squeaking. Back and forth. I tried to close the application window. The cursor wouldn't move. It was frozen in the center of the screen. The whisper came again, louder this time, clearer, cutting through the static. It was right next to my ear. "Why did you leave me there, Alex?" The voice was not just in the laptop anymore. It was everywhere. It was the sound of the wind outside the window. It was the hum of the refrigerator. It was the blood rushing in my own ears. It was both the voice of the woman from 405, Lynn, Henderson had called her, and the other one, the one from that night. The two voices braided together into one single accusatory thread. I can't feel my legs. "Shut up," I breathed, the words tearing from my throat. I grabbed the laptop by its sides. My thumbs pressed against the cracked plastic frame. I slammed the lid shut. The click of the magnetic latch was loud, violent. I squeezed it, my muscles screaming, as if I could crush the sound inside. But it didn't stop. The whisper was still in the room. Freed from the tiny speakers, it now had a body. A presence. It seemed to seep from the walls, to rise from the floorboards. "You feel it too, don't you?" The voice was calm now. Conversational. It slid over my skin like something cold and wet. The guilt. It's heavy. Like a wet blanket. It's hard to breathe sometimes. I scrambled backwards on the floor, kicking the closed laptop away from me. It skidded across the wood and hit a cardboard box with a dull thud. "No," I whimpered. My back hit the wall. I pressed myself into the plaster, trying to become part of it. "No, you're not real." "Not real?" The voice let out a soft, airy laugh. It was a terrible sound. "I was real. I had a name. I had a family. Just like her, the one in the car." My hands flew to my ears. I pressed my palms hard against them, trying to crush the sound, to block out the words. I squeezed my eyes shut. Darkness. I could still hear it. The voice was inside my head now. It was bouncing around the hollow spaces of my skull. "You think a new city can wash it off? A new apartment? You can't run from the dirt under your own fingernails, Alex." I curled into a ball on the floor. I pulled my knees to my chest. My teeth chattered. A low sound escaped my lips. A moan. An animal sound of pure agony. The attack was relentless. There was no defense. It was using my own mind against me, armed with a truth I could not deny. It knew my deepest secret, and it was peeling the skin off it, layer by layer. The cold floorboards bit into my cheek. The rough texture of my jeans scraped against my face. This was real. The pain was real. The voice was real. "Just like me," the whisper echoed, fading slightly. "Left in the dark. Waiting. So cold." And then, silence. The sudden absence of sound was as jarring as the noise had been. The room was absolutely still. No whisper. No rain. No hum of electricity. Nothing. The only sound was the frantic, ragged rasp of my own breathing. I lay there for a long time. Minutes. I counted the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. My body was a single rigid knot of terror. Slowly I uncurled. My muscles ached. I pushed myself up into a sitting position. My head felt light. The room spun slightly. The apartment was just an apartment. A collection of cardboard boxes and cheap furniture. The evening light from the window cast long shadows on the floor. It was quiet. My eyes fell on the laptop. It lay on its side by the box it had hit. The lid was still closed. I crawled towards it. My movements were slow, cautious, like a man approaching a venomous snake. I reached out a trembling hand. My fingers touched the smooth metal case. It was just a machine. Cold plastic and metal. I took a breath. I hooked my finger under the lid and lifted it. The screen was black, not the powered down, reflective black from before. This was a deeper black. Lifeless. I pressed the power button. Nothing happened. I pressed it again, holding it down. No light, no flicker, no response. It was dead. I stared at the blank screen, at the keyboard below it. My gaze locked onto my hands. My fingers were still resting on the keys. There was something on them. Dark smudges on the gray plastic. My right hand, the one that had slammed the lid shut, was dirty. Not just smudged. There were dark, wet streaks on the J, K, and L keys. I lifted my hand, bringing it closer to my face. The smell hit me first. A rich, loamy smell. The smell of a forest floor after a storm. The smell of a freshly dug grave. It was mud. Thick, wet, dark brown mud, caked under my fingernails and smeared across my fingertips, and stuck to the pad of my index finger, plastered there by the moisture, was a single, vibrant green blade of wild grass. I stared at my hands. The mud was a foreign presence, a violation. It was caked under my fingernails, a dark crescent moon beneath each one. It was smeared on my skin, gritty and cool. I ran my thumb over my index finger. The single blade of grass was pasted there, a shocking slash of green against the brown and white. I did not know where it came from. I did not want to know. My first action was to erase it. I scrambled to the kitchen sink, my knees protesting on the hard floor. I turned the tap. The water came out cold. I scrubbed my hands under the stream. The mud swirled and broke apart, turning the water a dirty gray before vanishing down the drain. I dug my nails into the bar of soap, scraping out the filth until my skin was raw. Clean. I dried my hands on my jeans. The laptop was dead. The voice was gone. The mud was gone. But the apartment was not the same. It was a space I no longer understood. It held things I couldn't explain. I needed proof. A real thing. Not a sound. Not a dead machine. Something I could hold. Something I could show someone else. Something that would prove I wasn't losing my mind. The thought was a command. My body moved. I started with the living room. I didn't unpack the boxes. I tore them open. I ripped through packing paper and bubble wrap, my movements stiff and automatic. Books. Dishes. Old clothes. Nothing. I kicked the empty boxes aside. The noise was loud in the quiet room. I got on my hands and knees. My eyes scanned the floor, the space beneath the furniture, dust bunnies, a stray penny, a forgotten screw from some disassembled shelf. My gaze caught on the sofa. It was a cheap thing I bought second-hand, low to the ground. I pushed my cheek to the floorboards, the varnish cool against my skin. It was dark under there. I used my phone's light. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a landscape of dust and lost things. And then I saw it, tucked against the back leg, almost hidden. It was not dust. It was not a coin. It had color. A deep, shining green. I reached under, my fingers stretching. They brushed against something smooth and metallic. I hooked it and dragged it out. I sat up, the object resting in my palm. It was a hair clip. A simple metal barrette. But the top was coated in a glossy jade green enamel. It was elegant. It was feminine. It was not mine. I had never seen it before. A wave of something hot and sharp rushed through my chest. Vindication. This was it. This was real. This was the proof. It wasn't my guilt from the crash. It wasn't my mind fracturing in a new city. A woman had been in this room. Lynn. The woman from 405. She had been here. Henderson was right. The clip was cool and heavy in my hand. I closed my fist around it, the metal edges digging into my palm. An anchor. My phone vibrated against my leg. The buzz was violent. An electric shock. I flinched, my hand flying to my pocket. I pulled it out. The screen was lit up. Unknown number. My thumb hovered over the green icon. The call from the basement had also been from an unknown number. My heart was a hammer against my ribs. I had to answer. I needed to know. I swiped the screen. I pressed the phone to my ear. Hello? My own voice sounded thin. There was no answer. Only sound. A woman's voice, high and distressed. She wasn't talking to me. I was listening in on something else. The connection was poor, crackling with static. Told you not to. Just leave it alone. Please. The words were choked, broken by sobs. Then a man's voice, low and indistinct, a rumbling murmur I couldn't make out. The woman cried out again, a sharp yelp of fear. A muffled thud, like something heavy hitting a wall. A struggle. The sound of fabric tearing. The woman was gasping for air now, making wet, desperate sounds. Then a single, clear sound cut through the static, sharp and final. A click. The dry snap of a deadbolt locking into place. After that, nothing. The line went dead. The silence was absolute. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it. The screen showed the call had ended. "Hello?" I shouted at the phone. "Who is this? Is anyone there?" The only response was the faint hum of my refrigerator. I stabbed the redial button. An automated message immediately chirped in my ear. "The number you have dialed is not in service. Please check the number and try again." I tried twice more. The same message. Not in service. It was impossible. A dead number had just called me. A ghost call. A recording of a nightmare. The hair clip was still in my other hand. I squeezed it tighter. The call was a trick. The clip was real. The clip was the only thing that mattered. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. They would look at me, at my history. They would see the file. They would think I was unstable. But my sister, Kate, she would listen. She would have to. I would show her the clip. She couldn't argue with a physical object. I found her name in my contacts list. I put the hair clip in the front right pocket of my jeans, making sure it was secure. I pressed the call button. It rang twice. "Alex, is everything okay?" "It's late." Her voice was groggy with sleep, but clear. "Kate," I said. My words came out too fast, tumbling over each other. "Kate, listen to me, I have proof." "Proof of what?" "Alex, slow down. What's wrong?" "The neighbor. The woman. She's real. I'm not making it up. I found something. In my apartment. Something of hers." "Found what? What are you talking about?" There was an edge of concern in her voice now, the kind a doctor uses with a difficult patient. "A hair clip," I said, my voice rising. "A green hair clip. She was here, Kate. Something is happening in this building. I'm not crazy." "Okay, Alex. Okay. Just breathe. Where are you?" "In my apartment." "I'm telling you, I have it right here. It's proof." "All right," she said, her tone slow and placating. "All right, we can talk about this in the morning. Just lock your door and try to get some sleep." "Okay, will you do that for me?" "You don't believe me," I said. The heat in my chest turned cold. "I believe that you're scared. We'll figure it out tomorrow. I promise. Just get some rest." "Okay," I whispered. I ended the call. The phone screen went dark. She didn't believe me. She thought I was having an episode. But it didn't matter. In the morning, I would show her. She would hold the clip in her own hand. Then she would see. I stood there in the middle of the room, surrounded by the wreckage of my search. A sense of purpose settled over me. I just had to get through the night. I slid my hand into my right pocket to feel the clip one more time, to touch the solid, irrefutable proof. My fingers met soft denim. Nothing else. I stopped breathing. I pushed my hand deeper, feeling along the seams, into the corners. Empty. My blood ran cold. No, it was just in the wrong pocket. I jammed my other hand into my left pocket. Keys. My wallet. Loose change. I pulled everything out. The contents clattered onto the wooden floor. A small pile of metal and leather. No green hair clip. "No," I said out loud. The word was a puff of air. It was here. It was right here. I looked at the floor around my feet. Nothing. I started patting myself down, my hands moving frantically over my chest, my legs, my back pockets. Nothing. My movements became more violent. I tore at my pockets again, almost ripping the fabric. It was gone. It had been in my hand. I had put it in my pocket. I felt it. It was real. "Where is it?" I whispered, my voice shaking. I got on my hands and knees again, my eyes scanning the same floor I had just searched. I ran my hands over the floorboards, feeling for the small metal bar. My heart was a wild animal thrashing in my chest. It was right here. I crawled around the room, sweeping my hands across the floor in wide arcs. I had it! I fucking had it! I screamed the last words at the empty room. The sound echoed back at me, thin and desperate. I crawled back to the pile of my belongings. I picked up each key, looked under my wallet. It wasn't there. It wasn't anywhere. It was just gone. Vanished from a sealed pocket in the time it took to make a 2-minute phone call. A sob of pure frustration ripped from my throat. My fist clenched. I saw the wall in front of me. I drew my arm back and slammed my knuckles into the plaster. Pain exploded in my hand. A sharp, white-hot fire. It was a good feeling. It was a real feeling. I hit the wall again. And again. My hand went numb. I slumped back, my head hitting the wall with a dull thud. My own irrationality was a tangible force, a second person in the room mocking me. I pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes, trying to force the world away. I don't know how long I sat there, a heap on the floor. My breathing eventually slowed. The pain in my hand subsided into a low, steady throb. I felt hollowed out. Defeated. I lowered my hands. My phone lay on the floor a few feet away, its screen still lit from when I dropped it. My eyes drifted to it without thinking. It was on the recent calls screen. My gaze slid past Kate's name. At the top of the list, under outgoing, was the call I had made just before I called my sister. The one to the number that was not in service. My mind replayed it. I had called. It had given me an automated error message. A few seconds. 5, maybe 10 at most. But that's not what the screen said. My eyes focused on the number, and next to it, the call duration. 15:02. The number on the screen did not change. 15:02. 15 minutes and 2 seconds. My own call log, the one listing my outgoing calls, showed the redial attempt I had made right after. 6 seconds. Then the automated message. The math was broken. The world was broken. I pushed myself up. My right hand was a swollen knot of meat. The knuckles were split, crusted with dark blood, and flecks of white plaster. A sharp, clear pain shot up my arm with every movement. It was a good thing. It was an anchor in the shifting reality of the room. The phone call, the disappearing clip, the impossible timestamp. They were smoke. The pain in my hand was iron. I could not stay in the apartment. The thought wasn't a decision, it was a biological imperative, like the need to breathe. The air was thin, used. The silence was not an absence of sound, but a presence. A weight. I grabbed my keys from the floor. The jingle was loud, a small, sharp violence in the quiet. I put on my jacket, my damaged hand protesting as I pushed it through the sleeve. I didn't look back. I pulled the door shut behind me. The click of the lock was final. The streets were mostly empty. A few cars slid by on wet pavement, their headlights cutting cones of white through the damp air. The city exhaled a mist that clung to everything, blurring the edges of the streetlights into halos. I walked without a destination, just putting distance between myself and apartment 404. I needed people. I needed the mundane hum of other lives to drown out the noise in my own head. I found it in a diner that promised coffee 24/7. The windows were steamy, the light inside a warm, buttery yellow. I went in. The smell of hot grease, burnt coffee, and disinfectant hit me. It was the smell of normalcy. I took a booth in the corner, one that faced the door but gave me a view of the whole room. A handful of other souls were scattered around. A trucker reading a paper at the counter. 2 old men playing chess. A young couple in another booth not speaking, just scrolling on their phones. They were real. Their boredom was a shield. A waitress came over. She was tired. Her name tag said, Brenda. She put a glass of water and a menu on the table. The plastic was sticky. Coffee? She asked. Her voice was flat. Yes, black. She nodded and walked away. I watched her every move. The way she poured the coffee, the way she carried the pot, the slight shuffle in her step. It was all predictable. It was all safe. She brought the coffee. I wrapped my good hand around the warm mug. My other hand lay on the table. A useless, throbbing thing. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I couldn't go to Kate. Not now. Not with nothing. I couldn't call the police. I had a file. They would read the file before they even listened to my story. They would see a man with a shattered past, a man with a history of things not being what they seemed. I was alone with this. The thought was a cold, hard stone in my gut. From my jacket pocket, I pulled out a small, cheap notebook and a pen. I bought them for making grocery lists, for jotting down reminders. I opened it to a blank page. I needed to do something with my hands. something other than clenching one of them into a fist. The pen felt strange in my left hand. Awkward. I started to draw. I didn't think about it. I just let the pen move. A curved line for a cheek. A long, straight line for a nose. An oval shape. I drew an eye, but it didn't look right. I scribbled over it, hard, tearing the thin paper. I turned the page. I started again. A face. Long hair that fell around it. I drew the eyes again, wide and dark. The mouth was a thin, straight line. No expression. I stared at it. It was a crude, clumsy drawing, but there was something there. A familiarity. I turned the page again, and again. Each time, I drew the same face, the same long hair, the same empty eyes. My sketchbook filled with her, a silent army of ink and paper ghosts. My breathing was shallow, my hand moved, but I wasn't the one driving. Looks like you've seen a ghost. The voice made me jump. Brenda. She was standing there with the coffee pot. I hadn't heard her approach. I closed the notebook, my hand covering the drawing. My heart was a fast, hard rhythm against my ribs. Just tired, I said. The words felt thick in my mouth. She looked at me, her gaze lingering on my swollen hand. She didn't ask. She just poured more coffee into my mug. Yeah, well, this place is full of tired people. She started to turn away, then paused. Hang on. She reached into her apron pocket. Someone left this for you. She placed a single, folded paper napkin on the table next to my cup. My eyes locked onto it. It was a standard issue diner napkin, thin and white, but on its surface, written in a smear of waxy bright red, was a single word. The letters were shaky, urgent. Run. The coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. The heat from the ceramic was gone. My skin was cold. I looked up at Brenda. Her face was a mask of professional disinterest. She had already moved on. Who? I asked. My voice was low. Who left this? She gestured vaguely toward the door with the coffee pot. A girl. She was sitting over there. She pointed to an empty booth by the window. Left a few minutes ago. Said you looked like you could use it. My blood felt like ice water in my veins. A girl? What did she look like? Brenda shrugged, already turning to another table. I don't know. Young. Long dark hair. Wore a white dress. She paused, looking back at me over her shoulder. Looked sad. She walked away. I was out of the booth before my mind caught up. The chair screeched against the linoleum floor. The chess players looked up. I ignored them. I threw a $10 bill on the table and pushed through the heavy glass door, out into the night. The mist was thicker now. The street was a tunnel of hazy light and shadow. I looked left. An empty sidewalk. I looked right. Nothing. My eyes scanned the street, the parked cars, the dark storefronts. It was a trick. Another game. A red lipstick message from a phantom. My mind was building the cage around me, bar by bar. Then I saw it, far down the block, at the mouth of a narrow service alley between two brick buildings. A shape. A flicker of movement. A pale form against the deeper dark. White. A white dress. Hey! I shouted. The sound was swallowed by the wet air. The figure paused. It turned its head, just for a second. I couldn't see a face, only the silhouette of long hair falling over his shoulder. Then it slipped into the alley. I didn't think. I ran. My feet hammered the pavement. My lungs burned with cold, damp air. The pain in my hand was a white-hot fire, a constant reminder of the wall in my apartment. The alley was a dark slash between the buildings. I plunged into it without slowing down. The world narrowed to a corridor of wet brick and glistening concrete. The air was thick with the smell of dumpsters and decay. The only light came from a single bare bulb high above, casting long, distorted shadows. She was ahead of me. I could see the white of her dress, a moving beacon in the gloom. She wasn't running fast. She was moving with a slow, deliberate grace, as if she were taking a walk, as if she were waiting for me. Lane! The name came out of me, a raw sound torn from my throat. Wait! Stop! She didn't stop. She just kept moving, her white dress a stark violation against the grime of the alley. I pushed myself harder, my legs straining. The alley was a dead end. I could see the back wall now, a high expanse of brick and steel. She was trapped. I was 10 feet behind her. 5 feet. She reached the back wall and was simply gone. I skidded to a stop, my shoes scraping on the gritty concrete. I was breathing in ragged gasps. I leaned against the cold brick, my whole body trembling. The alley was empty. It was a straight shot. No doors, no windows, just dumpsters and trash cans. And at the end, a large, rusted steel service door set into the brick wall. It was covered in graffiti and rust streaks. There was nowhere she could have gone. I pushed myself off the wall, my eyes scanning the small, enclosed space. Nothing. Not a sound but my own harsh breathing and the distant hum of the city. It was another dead end. Another impossibility. I was chasing shadows. My gaze fell on the steel door. It was old, dented, secured with a heavy, rust-covered chain and a padlock. More graffiti covered its surface, tags and names sprayed in a dozen colors. But in the center of the door, something else. Something newer. It was a drawing. Done in white chalk. A crude, hurried sketch of a face. Long, straight hair. Wide, empty eyes. A thin, straight mouth. It was the exact same face I had drawn over and over in my notebook not 15 minutes ago. My blood stopped. My breath hitched in my throat. I took a step closer. The drawing was stark against the dark, rusted metal. It was as if someone had reached into my head, pulled the image out, and slapped it onto the door. My eyes traced the chalk lines, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. Below the drawing, near the bottom of the door, was another mark in the white chalk dust that seemed to have been scattered there. It was darker, a smudge against the white. No, not a smudge. It was a pattern, the distinct impression of fingers and a palm, pressed flat against the door. I knew the shape. I knew the exact size and spacing of those fingers. Slowly, as if moving underwater, I raised my right hand. The one that was swollen and split open. The one that still had flecks of white plaster caught in the dried blood on its knuckles. I held it up in front of my face, a few inches from the chalk print on the door. It was a perfect match. I looked from my hand to the door. From the door back to my hand. The same white chalk dust that made up the drawing was now on the tips of my fingers, mingling with the blood in the plaster. I didn't remember coming here. I didn't remember finding chalk. I didn't remember drawing a face on a steel door in a dead-end alley. But the evidence was on my skin. The proof was right in front of my eyes. I stood there, alone in the dark, staring at my own handiwork. A scar I had left on the world without knowing it. And the cold, sharp certainty washed over me. This wasn't a ghost haunting me. It was me. I walked out of the alley. The cold air felt like it was passing straight through my skin. I did not run. Each step was deliberate, a measured retreat from an impossible truth. My right hand was held out in front of me, away from my body, as if it belonged to someone else. The white chalk was a ghostly film over the dried blood and raw knuckles. The city lights smeared it with a sick, yellow-orange glow. My hand. My drawing. The memory of the act was a perfect blank. A clean, carved-out space in my head, where a decision, an action, a reason should have been. There was only the before, staring at my clumsy sketches in the diner, and the after, staring at the same face drawn in chalk on a steel door. The in-between did not exist. I scrubbed the hand against my jeans. The chalk came off in dusty streaks, but the sensation remained. A phantom grit under my fingernails. Denial was a physical thing. A muscle in my chest that clenched hard, refusing to let the air in. It couldn't be me. It was a trick. Another game. She put it there. The girl. She had chalk on her hands and she pressed my hand to the door when I wasn't looking. The explanation was clumsy, weak. It fell apart as soon as I thought it, but it was better than the alternative. I passed a 24-hour electronics store. The windows were filled with blinking lights and screens showing loops of serene landscapes. An idea formed, not from thought, but from a deeper, more primal place. The need for proof. For a witness that wasn't me. An eye that could not be tricked. The inside of the store was too bright. The air was sterile and cool. A young man behind the counter looked up from his phone, bored. I didn't meet his gaze. I went straight to a display of small, black boxes. Security cameras. Nanny cams. I picked the smallest one. It was no bigger than a sugar cube. I paid in cash. The young man didn't say a word. He put the box in a plastic bag and I left. The walk back to the apartment building was a straight line. I did not look down side streets. I did not look for white dresses in the dark. I looked at the concrete in front of me. One step. Then the next. The click of the lock on apartment 404 was louder than before. It echoed in the hallway. Inside, the air was stale and unchanged. The silence felt heavy. I left the main light off, using only the dim glow from a lamp in the corner. I did not want to see the space too clearly. I took the camera out of its box. The instructions were simple. It connected to a laptop via a small USB cable. I found a place for it on the top corner of a bookshelf, tucked between a stack of old paperbacks. It had a wide-angle lens. From there, it could see the entire living room, the short hallway, and the front door. I ran the thin black cable down the back of the shelf and plugged it into my laptop on the small desk. The software booted up. A window opened on my screen showing a live, grainy, black and white feed of my own apartment. I saw the back of my own head as I adjusted the angle. I was a stranger in a box on a screen. Good! I sat down in the desk chair. It creaked. I pulled the chair around to face the room, the laptop on my lap. Now I had two views. The one from my own eyes, and the one from the camera. They showed the same empty room. The same worn couch. The same unremarkable door. I spoke to the empty air. My voice was rough. I'm going to catch you. The words felt heavy, foolish. This time, you don't get away. The sound of my own voice did nothing to fill the quiet. It only made it deeper when it was gone. I sat and watched. The laptop hummed. The numbers of the clock in the corner of the screen changed. 1:27. 1:28. My eyes moved back and forth. From the room to the screen. The room. The screen. They were identical. Nothing moved. The only sound was the far-off sigh of traffic and the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. My good hand rested on the desk. My injured hand throbbed in my lap, a dull, persistent beat. My eyelids grew heavy. The two images, the real room and the one on the screen, began to blur at the edges. I blinked hard. Fought it. I needed to see. The camera was my anchor. It was the truth. 2:12. My head dipped forward. I jerked it back up. 2:34. I pinched the skin on my good arm. The small pain was a spark, but it faded quickly. 3:01. My focus was a thin, fraying thread. The room had not changed. The screen had not changed. The thought that I was a man sitting alone in the dark, watching an empty room, began to feel less like a plan and more like a diagnosis. Then it happened. The image on the laptop flickered. For a split second, the feed dissolved into a roar of black and white static, like an untuned television. A sharp hiss came from the laptop speakers. It lasted for maybe 2 seconds. 3 at most. And then the picture snapped back. Clear. Stable. But it was wrong. The wooden dining chair, the one that had been tucked neatly against the wall, was now in the middle of the room. It sat there, angled slightly toward the bookshelf, toward the camera, toward me. My breath stopped. I stared at the screen, my mind refusing to connect the dots. I looked up from the laptop. Yes. There it was. The real chair. In the middle of the real room. I looked back at the screen. The screen showed the chair. The room contained the chair. The two realities matched. But one of them was a lie. I grabbed the mouse, my left hand clumsy. I rewound the footage. The recorded video played back, a small timeline bar tracking its progress. I watched the static burst across the screen again. The hiss followed. Then the clear image of the room with the chair in its new position. I dragged the cursor back, scrubbing through the moment of the glitch second by second, then frame by frame. The static was a chaotic dance of pixels, a snowstorm of noise. I slowed it down more. A single frame flashed. I paused it. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was not just random noise. For one fractional moment, hidden in the static, compressed and distorted by the digital failure, there was a face. It was pale. The eyes were wide, dark holes. The mouth was a lipless gash. It was stretched, warped, and barely human. But it was looking directly out of the screen. Directly at the lens. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I stared at the frozen image. The grotesque face stared back. It was her face. The face from my drawings. The face from the alley. At that exact moment, the lamp in the corner made a soft pop. It went out. The refrigerator in the kitchen whined down to silence. The low hum of the building died. The screen of the laptop blinked once, then went black. Complete darkness. Complete silence. The power was out. I was plunged into a void. I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. The only thing in the universe was the image of that face, burned onto the inside of my eyelids. My body went cold. I did not move. I did not breathe. I listened. The silence was absolute. So quiet I could hear the wet sound of my own eyeballs moving in their sockets. I reached out slowly with my left hand, my fingers crawling across the surface of the desk. They found what I was looking for, the cool plastic body of a box cutter I used for opening packages. I closed my hand around it. The cheap plastic was solid. Real. I pushed the small slider up with my thumb. A single, sharp click as the blade extended. Then I heard it. It was not a sound from the hallway, or the street, or the apartment next door. It was a whisper. A breath of air against the skin of my right ear. So close I felt the warmth. The words were not shouted. They were spoken softly, intimately. A girl's voice. Looking for me? A scream was torn from my throat. It was a raw, animal noise. I launched myself backwards, my chair crashing to the floor. I was on my feet, blind, swinging the box cutter wildly in the darkness in front of me. I slashed at the air, at the space where the voice had been. Left. Right. A frantic, desperate arc through nothing. My arm swung again, a wide, horizontal slice. The blade connected. It wasn't the sound of steel hitting plaster or wood. It was a soft, yielding resistance. A wet, tearing sound. A cut. I felt the vibration travel up my arm. It was followed instantly by a heavy thump on the floorboards in front of me. I froze, the box cutter still held out in the dark. My own breathing was a hurricane in my ears. I had hit something. Something was on the floor. An instant later the lights flickered back on. The lamp in the corner hummed. The refrigerator started its low drone. Light flooded the room, painfully bright. I blinked, my eyes adjusting. I was standing in the middle of the room. The desk chair was overturned behind me. I looked down. My whole body went rigid. The floor was empty. There was no one there. No body, no blood, nothing. Except for my laptop. It lay face down on the wooden floor where it had fallen from my desk. The screen had been the source of the thud. I bent down slowly, my joints screaming. I picked it up. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped it again. I turned it over. The screen was shattered. But it was not just a random spiderweb of cracks. Across the center of the dark display, there was a deep, straight gash. A clean cut, 5 inches long, that had torn through the glass and the liquid crystal display beneath. Pixels were dead and bleeding in a black line across the surface. The gash was exactly where the face and the static had been. I looked at the box cutter in my other hand. The blade was still extended. The tip was broken. A tiny, sharp piece of metal was missing from its end. I stared from the broken blade to the wound on the screen. From the screen back to the blade. I had done this. My terror. My hand. My blade. A scar on a screen. A souvenir from a fight with a ghost that only I could see. I did not pick up the laptop. I left it on the floor, a dark mirror with a wound across its face. The box cutter was still in my hand. I stared at the missing piece of the blade, a tiny silver sliver of metal that was now somewhere inside the dead screen. My actions. My consequences. The silence that followed the return of the power was different. It was not an absence of sound. It was the sound of the building breathing around me. A low hum I hadn't noticed until it was gone. The refrigerator in the kitchen kicked on with a shudder. The lamp in the corner gave off a faint electric buzz. Normal sounds. They felt alien. I let the box cutter fall from my fingers. It hit the wood floor with a plastic clatter. My feet started moving. I did not tell them to. I paced. From the desk to the front door. From the door to the small kitchenette. A tight, repeating circuit in the small space of the apartment. My body was a machine wound too tight, and the springs were starting to break. I ran my good hand along the wall as I walked. The cool, textured paint was a tether. It was solid, real. The wall behind the couch, the wall leading to the bedroom, the wall with the front door. Solid, solid, solid. I made another turn, my path taking me along the wall that separated my apartment from the one next door. 405. Her supposed apartment. My fingers dragged across the surface and stopped. Right there, in the middle of the long, blank wall, something was wrong. I pressed my palm flat against it. The plaster beneath the paint gave. It wasn't soft like clay, but it had a slight depression, a give that the other walls did not. It felt thin, weak, like pressing on a sheet of heavy cardboard that had gotten wet and then dried out. I took my hand away. I pressed again, in a different spot a few feet to the left. Solid. A foot to the right. Solid. But in that one specific area, the size of a large suitcase, the wall bowed inward under the pressure of my palm. I pushed harder. The surface flexed. I stepped back, my eyes tracing the outline of this weak spot. It was invisible. The paint was seamless, the texture uniform. But the feel of it was a shout in a quiet room. I made a fist with my left hand and tapped it gently. Thud. Solid. I moved my fist over. Thock. The sound was different, deeper, less a sound of plaster over studs, and more a sound of something hollow on the other side. A cavity. An empty space. My heart began a heavy, frantic beat against my ribs. It was a drumbeat counting down to something. My eyes scanned the Ania, hungry for another flaw. Down. Down toward the floor. I crouched, my knees cracking in protest. I ran my fingers along the baseboard. Paint. Wood. Dust. And there. A line. A hair-thin fissure running vertically from the baseboard up about 6 inches. It had been painted over, but the new paint was a shade too bright, a texture too smooth. A patch job. A clumsy attempt to hide something. A seam. This is it. The thought wasn't mine. It felt like it was dropped into my brain from a great height. It was a spark of something that felt like hope, but it was twisted and sharp. This was the proof. Not a flicker on a screen, not a whisper I could have imagined. This was physical. This was a place to start. A place to break in. I scrambled back to the overturned chair and snatched the broken box cutter from the floor. I went back to the wall, on my knees. I used the jagged edge of the broken blade to pick at the hairline crack. The blade was clumsy, but its broken tip found purchase. A small flake of the newer, brighter paint chipped away. Then another. Beneath it was not the old, yellowed paint of the rest of the wall, but a chalky, gray-white substance. Plaster. Fresh plaster. A frenzy took over me. The careful picking stopped. I started to dig, to claw at the wall. I jammed the blade in and twisted, gouging out a chunk of the soft plaster. It fell to the floor in a quiet puff of gray dust. I used my fingers, my nails scraping against the raw material. It was coarse and gritty, and it came away in chunks and powder. The hole grew wider. A smell wafted out from the growing darkness. It was damp. The smell of a basement that had been sealed for a year. But there was something else under it. A sweetish odor, thick and cloying. Like flowers left in a vase for too long, their water turning brown and foul. It was a smell of decay trying to pretend it was perfume. My fingers were raw. The skin around my nails was torn and bleeding. The red a stark contrast to the white dust clinging to my hands. I didn't feel the pain. I only felt the desperate need to see what was inside. To get through. To expose it. Something in the back of my mind screamed at me to stop. It was a cold pressure at the base of my skull. A feeling. A quiet, insistent thought that was not a product of my own will. Don't. The word was a feeling of dread. Don't look. Please. Stop. I ignored it. The digging became more frantic. I was an animal burrowing, escaping a trap by chewing through my own leg. I worked the box cutter into a seam in the plaster and pried. A large piece the size of my hand broke loose. It fell to the floor with a soft thump. The hole was big enough now. A black, gaping mouth in the wall. The sweet, foul smell was stronger, pouring out into the room. I felt it on my tongue. A greasy coating. The air felt heavy. I could feel a presence behind me. A weight in the room. A hand hovering just above my shoulder. A warning delivered without a sound. A silent plea to go no further. My hand was shaking, but I reached into the darkness. Into the space between the walls. Cool, stagnant air touched my skin. My fingers brushed against something hard and metallic. A pipe. I moved my hand past it, deeper into the cavity. My fingertips brushed against loose debris, more plaster dust, and then something small and smooth and cold. I closed my fingers around it. It was light. I pulled my hand back out into the dim light of the room. My hand was caked in gray dust and streaked with blood. Lying in my palm was an object. It was a hair clip. A small, elegant piece of plastic shaped like two green leaves. Jade green. I had seen it before. In the hallway. On the floor. The one I had left on her doorstep. As I stared at it, a memory detonated behind my eyes. It was not a thought. It was a full-body experience. A flash of a moment, brighter than the lamp in the corner. My own hands. Not like this, torn and bloody, but whole. They were covered in the same gray dust. In my right hand I held a trowel, its flat edge slick with wet plaster. With my left hand I pressed a final piece of drywall into place. The smell, that same cloying, sweet smell, was deafening. I worked quickly, methodically, sealing, hiding. A sense of deep, focused calm was on me. A job needed to be done. A job I was completing. The vision vanished. It left me on my knees, panting, the jade hair clip digging into my palm. A scream built in my chest and tore out of my throat. It was a high, thin sound of pure terror. I scrambled backwards, away from the wall, crab walking on my hands and heels. I flung the hair clip as if it were burning me. It arced across the room and clattered somewhere in the darkness of the kitchen. I pushed myself up, my back hitting the opposite wall. I stared at my own work. At the hole. The proof. The black, gaping wound in the sterile white paint. My eyes blinked. Once. A wet, slow blink to clear the tears of panic. I looked again. The hole was gone. My breath hitched. I squeezed my eyes shut and opened them again. The wall was perfect. Smooth. Unbroken. There was no hole. There was no discolored patch of paint. There was no hairline crack near the baseboard. The wall was a single, seamless plane of white. It stretched from the floor to the ceiling, solid and impassive. It had never been touched. It wasn't possible. I looked down at the floor. The pile of plaster dust and the larger chunks I had gouged out, they were gone too. The floorboards were clean. No, that wasn't right. I held up my hands in the lamplight. They were proof. They were the scar. They were covered, caked, in a thick layer of fine, gray plaster dust. My fingernails were broken and jagged. Fresh blood welled up from the raw, scraped flesh around the cuticles. A dozen tiny red beads against the white powder. The pain, which I had ignored before, now flared to life, a chorus of fire from every fingertip. I stared at my hands. Then, at the pristine, untouched wall. Back to my hands. Back to the wall. The two realities could not exist in the same room. The wall was a lie, or my hands were. A shudder racked my body, a violent, uncontrollable tremor. I was the only thing in the room that was broken. I was the only evidence of the crime. The pain was an anchor. A hot, sharp throb in each of my 10 fingertips that tethered me to the room. I held my hands up in the cone of light from the lamp. They were filthy, caked in a fine gray powder streaked with drying blood that beaded up from the torn skin around my nails. They were the truth. I looked at the wall. Perfect. Unblemished. a long, clean stretch of white. It was a liar. My mind was a faulty switch, flicking between two images. My ruined hands, the pristine wall. My bloody fingers, the clean floor. An engine turned over and over, but refused to catch. I just stood there, my back pressed to the opposite wall, staring. The tremor in my body had not stopped. It was a deep, internal vibration, a tuning fork struck against my bones. Thump! 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 The sound came from the front door, 3 heavy, solid impacts. It was not a polite knock. It was a demand. My head snapped toward the sound. My body went rigid. They had found me. She had warned me, and I hadn't listened, and now they were here. Kevin! Kevin, are you in there? It's me, Sarah. My sister's voice. It cut through the fog for a second. Sarah. Why was she here? I hadn't called her. I hadn't spoken to her in a week. Kevin, I know you're in there. I've been calling you. Please open the door. Her voice was muffled, strained with worry. But as it passed through the wood of the door, through the filter of my own mind, the words changed. The pitch seemed to shift, becoming softer, more familiar in a way that made the skin on my arms prickle. It wasn't my sister's voice anymore. It was hers. Kevin? Let me in. It's so cold out here. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I stared at the door, at the small brass peephole that looked like a blind, dead eye. My own hands, the proof, were still held up in front of me. The gray dust on them seemed to glow in the lamplight. Please, Kevin, open the door. A key scraped in the lock. The sound was a violation, loud and metallic. It was the sound of a surgeon's tool probing a wound. I heard the tumblers give way with a series of sharp, decisive clicks. The doorknob turned. The door swung inward with a low groan. My sister stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the unforgiving light of the hallway. Her hand was still on the knob. Her face was a mask of confusion, which quickly melted into alarm as her eyes adjusted to the dimness of the room. Her gaze swept over the overturned chair, the shattered laptop screen, and then it landed on me. Oh my God, Kevin, what happened? She took a step inside, letting the door close behind her. She didn't see me. Not really. She saw the shambles of the apartment. She saw the dark stains on my shirt where I had wiped my bleeding fingers. She saw my hair, matted with sweat. Your hands, she breathed. She started towards me. Stay back, I said. The words felt thick in my mouth, clumsy. She stopped. Her eyes were wide. What happened to your hands? Are you hurt? I didn't answer her. I couldn't look away from the wall. The perfect, lying wall. I pointed at it with a trembling, dust-caked hand. She was here? She tried to warn me. She? Who? Kevin, what are you talking about? Sarah's eyes followed my fingers, scanning the blank surface of the wall. Her brow furrowed. She took a few steps along it, her shoes quiet on the floorboards. She ran her own clean hand over the surface where I knew the hole had been. There's nothing here, she said, her voice gentle, the way you speak to a frightened animal. Look closer, I whispered. The drawings. She left a message. She turned back to me, her expression lost. What drawings? That was when she saw them. Not on the wall I was pointing at, but on the one perpendicular to it, the one next to the kitchenette. Her breath caught in her throat. I had not noticed them before, but now, seeing them through her eyes, they screamed at me. Dozens of them. Scrawled directly onto the paint with a black pen. They were all the same. The face of a woman. Simple, almost childish lines. 2 circles for eyes, a curve for a smile, long straight hair framing the face. It was her face. Her smile. Over and over again, a repeating pattern of black ink on white paint. And beneath each crude portrait, a single word was written in a frantic, spidery script. Run. 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 Kevin, Sarah whispered, her voice cracking. She reached out and touched the writing, her fingertip tracing the letter R. This is your handwriting. I stared at the wall. The smiling faces seemed to mock me. The warnings amplified the roaring in my ears. My handwriting. It was, I knew it was, but I didn't remember doing it. The memory wasn't there. It was another hole. Another piece of my mind that had been gouged out and plastered over. She was warning me, I repeated, my voice a low monotone. The conviction was solid. It was the only solid thing left. They're coming. We have to go. We have to get out of here. Sarah backed away from the wall of drawings, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked from the wall to me, and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. It wasn't fear for me, it was fear of me. Okay, she said, nodding slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. Okay, Kevin, we'll go. Just let me make a phone call first. She pulled her phone from her pocket. Her movements were slow, deliberate. I watched her thumb tap against the screen. Was she calling for help? For a taxi? For one of her friends? She turned away from me, a pointless gesture of privacy in the small room. I heard her speak in a low, urgent whisper. Yes, my name is Sarah Jennings. My brother. I'm at his apartment. 404 North Almont Drive. He's not well. He's hurt himself. He's saying things that don't make sense. I think he needs help. Please, you have to send someone. The words hit me like stones. 404 North Almont Drive. She was telling them where I was. Them. The ones the neighbor, the woman in the wall, had warned me about. My sister wasn't calling for help, she was turning me in. She was one of them. She had always been one of them. The realization was cold and sharp, a sliver of ice in my gut. I watched her back, the slight tremble in her shoulders. She was lying to me. The whole world was a lie, and she was a part of it. My gaze shifted from her to the room around me, searching for an escape, for a weapon, for anything. My eyes fell on the dark shape of the large, freestanding wardrobe against the far wall, the place I had seen her disappear. Sarah ended the call and turned back to me, tucking the phone away. She put on a weak, brittle smile. They're on their way, Kev. They're going to help us. You called them, I said. It wasn't a question. Yes, they'll take us somewhere safe. Her eyes were pleading, but all I saw was betrayal. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and I didn't see my sister. I saw a stranger wearing her face, a cog in the machine that was hunting me. She took a step toward me, her hands held out in a placating gesture. Kevin, please, let's just sit down until they get. Get away from me! The shout tore from my throat, raw and loud. I shoved myself off the wall, stumbling backward. The sudden movement made her flinch. You're one of them, I screamed, pointing a bloody, shaking finger at her. She told me about you! She told me you would come! I backed away until my shoulders hit the heavy wood of the wardrobe. My mind was racing, trying to make her see. To show her the proof. To show her that I wasn't the one who was broken. The world was. I fumbled for the handles of the wardrobe, my dusty fingers slipping on the brass. I ripped the doors open. See! I yelled, gesturing wildly at the dark, empty interior. At the neat row of my own shirts on hangers. She's not here. They took her. You took her. But she left the warnings. I stopped. Sarah wasn't looking at the wardrobe. She wasn't even looking at me. Her face was pale, her mouth slightly agape. She was staring at the floor right next to my feet. My yelling died in my throat. I followed her gaze. On the wooden floor, half tucked under the edge of the wardrobe, was a lamp, a heavy, brass table lamp, its base thick and ornate. Its cream-colored shade was crushed on one side, bent into a broken angle. That wasn't what held her gaze. It was the base. The heavy brass was dented, and on the curve of the dent there was a dark patch. Not dust, it was a smear, deep and reddish-brown, flaking at the edges. A dried, ugly stain. As I stared at the lamp, the room tilted. The hum of the lights faded. A memory, cold and clear, pushed its way through the static. It was not a flash this time. It was a long, slow-motion shot. The doorbell chiming. A pleasant, two-note sound. I opened the door. A woman is standing there. Not the ghost. A woman of flesh and blood, with a kind smile and a basket of muffins. Hi, she says. I'm Lily, from 405. Just wanted to welcome you to the building. Her smile is bright. She has a small, jade-green clip in her hair. My hand is already holding the lamp. I don't remember picking it up. Its weight is familiar, solid. My arm swings up. The smile on her face does not have time to disappear. It just freezes as the brass base connects with the side of her head. There is no loud crack, just a wet, heavy thud. The sound of a melon splitting on pavement. Her eyes roll back, the muffins scatter across the welcome mat, and I stand there, breathing hard, looking down at my work. A job needed to be done. The memory ended. I was back in the room, staring at the dented lamp. The weapon. A sound started in the room with me. It was a low, keening wail that grew and grew until it was a full-throated scream of absolute terror. It took me a second to realize it was coming from my sister. I looked up from the lamp to her face. Then, I looked down at my own two hands. Not the phantom dust and scrapes from the wall. The real ones. The ones that had swung the lamp. The ones that had dragged a body. The ones that had mixed the plaster. My hands. My consequences. The sound of the world returned in pieces. The scuff of heavy boots on wood. The low murmur of a voice I couldn't understand. Clipped and official. The squeal of a radio. I was on the sofa. My hands were in my lap, palms up. They were raw. The skin around the nails was torn, the blood now a dark crust mixed with gray plaster dust. A man in a blue uniform stood by the door, his hand resting on the holstered shape at his hip. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking at the wall I had tried to tear apart. Sarah was in the hallway. I could see her through the open doorway. Another man in a uniform was talking to her. His back was to me. Her face was a ruin, streaked with tears, white with shock. Her arms were wrapped around herself, a gesture to hold in whatever was breaking inside her. Her eyes kept darting towards me, then away, as if looking at me was like looking at the sun. I did not care. My own eyes were fixed on the door across the hall. Apartment 405. The door was open, just a crack, a vertical line of darkness against the sterile white of the hallway wall. The light from the hall didn't seem to penetrate it. It just stopped at the edge. A black slit. It was waiting. I knew it was. The story wasn't over. She was still there, waiting for me. The thought was a smooth, cool stone in the chaos of my mind. A new man came into the room. He wore plain clothes and carried a black case. He didn't look at me either. He spoke to the uniformed officer. His voice was low and flat. "Luminol?" The officer grunted a reply. The man in plain clothes opened his case. He took out a spray bottle and a large black lamp with a cord. He plugged the lamp into a wall socket near the kitchenette. The room went dark for a second as the uniformed officer hit the main light switch. Then a strange, purple glow filled the space. It made the white walls look bruised. The dust motes in the air became a swirling galaxy of tiny, bright specks. The man started at the floor, spraying a fine mist from the bottle. He swept the beam of the purple light across the floorboards. Nothing. He moved to the wall I knew. He sprayed again. He ran the light over the surface. And it was there. A ghost image bloomed in the unnatural light. A handprint. Large. Splayed wide. It glowed a faint chemical blue. It was low on the wall, near the floor. He moved the light up. Another print appeared. And another. A ladder of them, climbing the wall. They were smeared. Streaked. The marks of a struggle. My struggle. The evidence of my work. They weren't just handprints. They were marks of dragging. Something heavy. They went up. Up. Higher than I could reach. All the way to a small, square vent near the ceiling. A blue halo glowed around the edges of the vent's metal grill. "There," the plainclothes man said. The single word was loud in the quiet room. The uniformed officer grunted again. He spoke into the radio on his shoulder. His voice was all static and code. I watched them. I felt nothing. It was like watching a film about someone else. The hands that made those glowing blue marks were not connected to the body sitting on this sofa. My hands were clean. They were just sore. The uniformed officer came over with a stepladder. Another man came in carrying a large crowbar and a sledgehammer. They set the ladder up beneath the vent. The plainclothes man took pictures. The flash, a series of silent, white explosions that momentarily bleached the purple glow. Then the officer on the ladder took the crowbar. He fit the flat end into the space between the drywall and the vent. He put his weight on it. Crack. The sound went straight through me. It was not a sound from the room. It was a sound from inside my head. A memory breaking the surface. My fingers, white-knuckled, gripping a black pen. The scratching sound it makes on the painted wall. The letters are jagged, desperate. R-U-N. My own hand. My own writing. The face I draw is a cartoon, a child's drawing of a smile. A smile I need to remember. Or a smile I need to forget. The officer grunted with effort. He twisted the crowbar. A large chunk of drywall and plaster fell to the floor, shattering in a cloud of white powder. It looked like the dust on my hands. He inserted the crowbar again, deeper this time. Scrape. The metal grinding against wood studs. A long, drawn-out shriek. The front door. My front door. A small, square box wrapped in brown paper sits on the mat. There is no note. I pick it up. Inside is a single muffin. I take it inside. I put it on the counter. I look at it for a long time. Then I throw it in the trash. The next day, I go to a craft store. I buy a small wicker basket. I go to the supermarket. I buy a box of blueberry muffins. I take one out. I put it in the basket. I leave it on my own doorstep. A gift. From a friend. A third man, another detective, was speaking to Sarah in the hall. "Ma'am, we need to know what he told you. Every detail." She was sobbing now. He said his neighbor warned him. The woman in the wall. He said they were coming for him. The officer on the ladder switched to the sledgehammer. He took a short, controlled swing. Thud. The wall shuddered. A spiderweb of cracks radiated out from the point of impact. A bucket of water. The sharp, chemical smell of bleach burning my nostrils. A red rag in my hand. On my knees. Scrubbing the floorboards. The wood is dark, stained. The water in the bucket turns pink, then red. I dump it down the toilet. I scrub again, and again, until my knuckles are raw and the stain is gone. Until the floor is just a damp patch of clean wood. Thud. Another swing. Harder this time. The hammer broke through the drywall. A dark space opened up. The men stopped. The plainclothes detective shone a powerful flashlight into the hole. The beam cut through the darkness between the studs. It was time. The film was reaching its climax. The audience held its breath. Sarah screamed. It was not a sound of fear. It was a sound of final, absolute comprehension. A sound of a world ending. The men pulled the rest of the wall away with their hands, tearing at the shredded paper and plaster. They worked quickly, efficiently. And then, the space was open. She was folded inside. Not a ghost. Not a memory. Flesh and bone. She was wedged between two wooden studs, her body contorted into a shape it was never meant to hold. She wore a simple blue dress. Her dark hair was matted with plaster dust and something darker. Her head was tilted at an impossible angle, her neck clearly broken. Her skin was pale and waxy in the glare of the flashlight. Tangled in her hair, near her temple, was a small jade-green hair clip. The cool, smooth stone in my mind dissolved. The dam broke. The film was over, and I was in it. I was the star. The doorbell chimes. A pleasant, two-note sound. I open the door. A woman is standing there. She has a kind smile and a basket of muffins. Her hair is tied back, and a small, jade-green clip holds a few loose strands in place. "Hi," she says. Her voice is warm. "I'm Lily, from 405. I saw you moving in and just wanted to welcome you to the building." She holds out the basket. "Blueberry, I can smell them." My hand is already holding the lamp from my side table. I don't remember picking it up. Its weight is heavy. Solid. A good tool. Her eyes are the same. The same as the woman who stepped out in front of my car. The one the lawyers called a tragic accident. The one I see every time I close my eyes. This is her. She found me. She came back to finish it. A job needs to be done. My arm swings up. There is no thought. No anger. Just mechanics. The brass base of the lamp connects with the side of her head. The sound is not a crack. It is a dense, wet thud. The sound of a melon splitting on pavement. Her smile freezes. Her eyes go wide, then lose focus. She doesn't make a sound. She just crumples. The basket falls. Muffins roll across the welcome mat. One of them stops next to my shoe. I stand there, breathing hard. I look down at my work. The hallway is empty. No one saw. I drag her inside. The weight is awkward. She is heavier than she looks. The lamp is on the floor, dented. There is a smear of blood and hair on the brass. A problem to be solved. I work all night. I pull the vent from the wall. I use a saw from the small toolkit I own to cut the drywall. I break her arm to make her fit. The crack of bone is louder than the thud of the lamp was. I push her into the dark space. Then, I fix the wall. Plaster. Spackle. Sanding. Paint. I am very careful. Very precise. A perfect, unblemished wall. When the work is done, I sit on the sofa. The silence of the apartment is too loud. It is the silence of a tomb. A tomb I built. My hands are shaking. The guilt from the accident, the real one, the one from before, it's a poison. This new act, it is too much. The mind cannot hold it. So it makes a new story. A better one. A story about a friendly neighbor. A ghost. A woman who understands my pain. A woman who leaves me gifts and tries to warn me. A story where I am not the monster. A story where I am the victim. It is a good story, I believe it. The memory ended. I was back on the sofa. The room was full of noise and movement. Sarah was being led away by an officer, her face buried in her hands. The detectives were talking, their voices calm and professional. A camera flashed. A hand landed on my shoulder. "Sir, you need to stand up." I stood up. I did not feel my legs. Another man stepped in front of me. He held up a pair of handcuffs. The silver metal glinted. "Turn around. Place your hands behind your back." I did as he asked. The cold steel clicked shut around my wrists. It was a firm, definite sound. The sound of an ending. The officer who cuffed me took my arm. His grip was firm but not rough. He started to lead me out of the apartment, out of my tomb. As we stepped into the bright, clean hallway, past the scattered remains of the wall, past the open door of 405, I stopped and turned for one last look. I saw the apartment, 404, clean, new, full of promise, and standing in the doorway was a man. He looked just like me, but younger, less tired. His eyes were clear. He was smiling, a small, hopeful smile. He raised a hand and gave a little wave. A goodbye. The officer tugged my arm gently. "Let's go." I turned away from the vision. I looked at the officer, the man leading me to my new life. I gave him a small, polite smile, the kind you give a new acquaintance. "I'm the neighbor," I whispered.